They walked toward the ICU, not to say goodbye, but to end her. Dr. Martinez tried to stop them, but Margaret snapped, waving the papers. "We have the legal documents. Life support ends today." They pushed past him, opened the door, and froze. Victoria was sitting up in bed, awake, watching them. In that instant, they realized she was never dead, and now she was their nightmare. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps this channel grow. Now let's begin. Victoria Harper's world was a prison of sensation and silence. She could feel everything, every tremor of the gurney as it rolled through sterile corridors, every shift of the crisp hospital sheets against her skin, every faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Her heart hammered against a body that refused to obey. Every attempt to move a finger, a hand, even the blink of an eye, ended in excruciating frustration. The body was hers, but it was no longer hers. It belonged to something else, a cage of flesh and bone. She could hear the distant sounds of life beyond her hospital room, the beeping monitors, hurried footsteps, hushed murmurs of nurses, the distant wheeze of a ventilator. But the most terrible sounds, the ones that clawed at her from the shadows, were the whispers and laughter of those who had claimed she was gone. Her husband, Ethan Caldwell, and his mistress, Olivia Price, with Margaret Caldwell, the matriarch whose hands were always stained with greed and manipulation, plotted as if her existence had already been erased. Time was meaningless in this suspended hell. Victoria had heard them speak of the end, as if it were a mere administrative procedure. She had felt the chilling weight of the sheet pulled over her face, the whisper of latex gloves brushing her skin, the doctor's voice, detached and weary. Time of death. 3:47 a.m. She screamed inside her mind, a scream that reverberated with "I'm
not
not
dead.
unyielding
I'm alive.
truth. I'm right here." No sound escaped her lips. No movement betrayed the fire within. Only the cold metal of the morgue table pressed into her back, icy and unrelenting. She could hear the morgue attendant moving around her, humming a song she didn't recognize, the scrape of instruments against stainless steel. Every sound, every vibration, every minuscule movement of air was amplified, and every one of them felt like a betrayal. They thought they could erase her. They believed the body's stillness equaled her defeat. But they had not accounted for the consciousness that refused to die, the mind that burned with awareness, the mother that still beat fiercely beneath the surface. The day had begun with hope. Victoria had been surrounded by sterile white walls, gleaming monitors, and the rhythmic pulse of life that once felt comforting. She had thought childbirth would be her first step into a future where love, family, and warmth intertwined. She had thought her husband, Ethan, would be there, steady and proud. She had thought the presence of her mother-in-law, Margaret, while unnerving at times, could not eclipse her joy. But nothing had gone according to plan. From her unconscious state, Victoria had heard it all. The creak of the door, the hurried footsteps of those who should not have been there. Ethan's voice, smooth, too confident, too gleeful, cut through the air. "You really didn't think we'd let this go quietly, did you?" And then Olivia's laugh, a high-pitched, calculating sound that made Victoria's chest tighten even in stillness. Olivia was wearing something she should never have touched, Victoria's wedding dress, carefully stolen from the dry cleaner days before, the fabric soft and familiar to Victoria's mind, now a weapon of humiliation. Victoria could picture her in vivid detail, every fold of silk clinging to her form, the perfume, Victoria's own signature scent, drifting through the room, a cruel mockery. Her ears registered every word, every plan, every stolen moment of triumph. Margaret's voice was cold, deliberate, unfeeling. "The baby will be mine. Everything will be arranged. You'll be forgotten." Victoria's fingers twitched beneath the immovable skin. She wanted to tell them she was listening, she was alive, she was burning with rage. But her body betrayed her, a vessel of helplessness. She had heard their plotting, their laughter, their sneers. Every syllable was a knife in her consciousness. As the hours crept forward, Victoria's mind became a theater of horror. Margaret's machinations were not subtle. She spoke to lawyers, to distant associates, orchestrating the sale of a child who should have been hers, laughing as if it were a game, not a crime. "She doesn't even know we're here," Margaret murmured, smoothing the paperwork in front of her with predatory grace. "By tonight, she'll be gone. And everything we want will be ours." Ethan chuckled, a sound that had once brought comfort, now twisted into something vile. "It's almost too easy," he said. "She's never been clever enough to see it coming." Olivia twirled in the dress, the fabric whispering as she moved. "She's asleep forever. She can't fight back. And I got what I always wanted." Victoria's mind roared at them. She wanted to shout, to leap from her body, to tear them apart with her voice alone. But the body, her own vessel, remained unresponsive. Every movement was denied. Every breath of rage suffocated beneath skin and bone that had become prison walls. The hospital smelled of antiseptic, of fear, and of luxury fresh flowers, the faint trace of designer perfume mingling with sterile plastic. Each sound was magnified, the rustle of Margaret's papers, the clink of Ethan's cufflinks, the sigh of Olivia as she strutted triumphantly. She was there, fully aware and yet utterly powerless. The announcement of her death was clinical, cold, and deliberate. The doctor's voice carried through the room as if announcing a minor inconvenience rather than the murder of a living, conscious woman. Time of death: 3:47 a.m. Victoria's mind screamed against the words, her inner voice shattering with fury. "I am alive. I am here. I am your nightmare waiting." They moved her, the sensation terrifying in its inevitability. The gurney slid across linoleum floors, wheels squeaking, every vibration tracing down her spine. She felt herself pass into the morgue, the chill of metal searing through her skin. The attendant hummed, unaware of the life pulsing beneath her still body, preparing the instruments of supposed finality. Everything was amplified: the scratch of metal, the soft shuffle of shoes, the muffled conversations beyond the walls. Each sound was a testament to the audacity of her enemies. They believed they had won. They had not even begun to understand the fire they had awakened. Even as she lay immobilized, Victoria's mind raced. She catalogued every face, every voice, every laugh and sneer. Each would have its consequences. Each would be met with a force they could not imagine. Days blurred together, and the tension coiled tighter with each passing hour. Victoria's hearing became her lifeline. She could detect the subtlest inflections in Ethan's voice, the slight edge of greed in Margaret's, the overconfidence in Olivia's laugh. They spoke freely, assuming her silence was eternal. "By day 30, we'll remove all obstacles," Margaret whispered to Ethan in one of the quieter moments. "No one will know we acted. The baby, the property, the inheritance, they'll be ours." Ethan nodded, a cruel satisfaction spreading across his face. "She won't even see it coming. Not a clue." Olivia twirled, the silky dress whispering across the floor. "I've waited for this moment for so long. Everything she had, mine now." Victoria's consciousness flared with a ferocity that stunned even her. She imagined moving, even slightly, but the body refused. She could only watch, hear, and plan. Every word, every step. Every small act of betrayal became ammunition in her mind. Dr. Martinez, the doctor who had tried to protect her, walked the hallways like a reluctant guardian angel. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered to himself one night, glancing at the ICU. "It's unnatural. But something tells me she's not gone yet." Victoria had no voice to respond, no gesture to affirm her presence. She could only seethe, a storm contained in flesh that would not obey. Yet within that storm, a single truth became clear: they had underestimated her. Ethan, Margaret, and Olivia thought they were architects of her death. They were not. They were prisoners in the labyrinth she had built inside her own mind. And when she moved, when she finally broke free, there would be no mercy. Victoria Harper woke with a clarity so shocking it felt like a lightning strike to the chest. One moment, there had been darkness, the cold metal, the muffled hums of distant life. The next, she was sharply, painfully aware of the room around her. Her lungs expanded involuntarily as if testing their strength, each inhale crisp and full. The monitors blinked insistently at her, the rhythmic beep like a countdown, and she realized that she had moved, just slightly, a tiny lift of her hand, but it was enough. The ICU was dim, the luxury of its private room softened by faint, tasteful touches. Fresh flowers, a leather chair by the window, silk curtains drawn halfway to filter the early morning light. Everything spoke of wealth, privilege, and control, but Victoria now saw it as a stage for the drama that had been played behind her back for weeks. Through the door, she heard the soft click of shoes on tile, muted voices arguing in hushed tones. Then the unmistakable, infuriating laughter of Olivia Price. Victoria's pulse spiked, rage roaring through her veins. She could smell the perfume before she even saw her, the same scent that had clung to her wedding dress, the same scent that had mocked her in every nightmare of the past month. Victoria forced her legs to twitch beneath the covers. A shiver of triumph raced through her body. She was alive. They had assumed she was gone, assumed that a declaration of death could erase her presence. They had underestimated her. Ethan's voice floated from the hall, smug, arrogant, infuriating. "I can't believe this is happening. She's gone, isn't she?" Margaret's sharp, clipped voice cut in, filled with menace. "Check the monitors again. She's been gone for weeks. There's no way she survived. Not after that." Olivia's laugh rang, cruel and victorious. "I knew it. Everything's perfect. She'll never wake up, and I'll finally have everything I wanted." Victoria inhaled deeply, savoring their ignorance, their arrogance. She flexed her fingers slowly, deliberately. It was the first movement she had made in what felt like an eternity, but it was enough to anchor her, to remind her mind that the body was still hers to reclaim. The door opened before she could fully plan her first words. Margaret stormed in, papers in hand, exuding confidence as though walking into a conquered territory. Olivia followed, laughter bubbling over, her eyes alight with glee. Ethan lagged slightly behind, holding a coffee cup with a smug, triumphant grin. Victoria's sudden upright position in the bed froze them in place. The motion was subtle but unmistakable, her head tilted, her eyes wide open and scanning, calculating. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of machinery and the distant echo of the corridor. Ethan's cup tipped from his grasp, coffee spilling across the polished floor. The sudden movement broke the momentary spell. Olivia shrieked, a sharp, terrified sound that sounded more animal than human. Margaret stumbled backward, catching herself against the doorframe, eyes wide as the reality of Victoria's presence hit. Victoria's voice was calm, deliberate, and carried the weight of someone who had been thought dead but was very much alive. "Hello. Surprised to see me?" Ethan's jaw worked, opening and closing like a fish out of water. Words failed him. His arrogance had evaporated in an instant, replaced by panic he didn't know how to disguise. Margaret's face twisted with fury and disbelief. She tried to recover, regaining a semblance of authority. We had the papers. Everything was in order." She. Victoria's gaze cut through her words, sharp and unyielding. She did not speak loudly, did not need to raise her voice. Her presence alone was accusation enough, a weight of awareness that made the room crackle with tension. "You really thought it would be that easy?" Olivia's mouth fell open, her earlier confidence dissolving into fear. Her shoulders slumped slightly, but she tried to cling to dominance. She's gone, she was. Victoria's eyes narrowed, fury simmering just beneath control. "Gone? You mean you thought you could bury me? Bury a mother?" The room was charged with a dangerous, silent electricity. Victoria, finally fully awake and aware, studied them with a precision honed by weeks of helpless observation. She catalogued every gesture, every micro-expression, every quiver in their voices. Ethan, once confident, now fidgeted nervously. His smugness had been replaced by terror, every twitch betraying the fear he could not articulate. Margaret's practiced composure cracked at the edges, the paper in her hand shaking slightly as she tried to mask her panic. Olivia's laughter had been replaced by shallow breaths and darting eyes, the false bravado stripped away. Victoria's mind raced as she anticipated every move. She could already see the cracks in their armor, the openings they did not realize she had been waiting for. They thought they had planned every eventuality. They had not considered her survival, not considered that a mother's awareness, even trapped in a still body, is sharper than steel. "You should have left me," Victoria said, her tone a whisper, yet it filled the space with a suffocating authority. "You should have assumed I would stay where you left me. But you didn't account for one thing." Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on Margaret's paper, Ethan's trembling hands, Olivia's desperate attempts at composure. "I'm a mother. And mothers don't disappear just because you declare them gone. You bury mothers, you think you've won, but we grow back." The words were simple, but in them was a weight heavier than any legal document, more binding than any threat. Each syllable landed like a hammer strike on their fragile confidence. Olivia's previous arrogance was now a liability. She had paraded in Victoria's wedding dress, stolen perfumes, stolen designer clothes, believing herself untouchable. But Victoria's presence, her full awareness, rendered all that vanity meaningless. Victoria studied Olivia with icy precision, noting the subtle tremble in her fingers, the sweat forming at her temples, the way her smile failed to mask pure fear. Every laugh, every step Olivia had taken in mockery, now became ammunition in Victoria's mind. "You really thought you could take everything from me," Victoria said, her voice calm but hard, like ice sliding over stone. "Every dress, every scent, every piece of what belonged to me gone in your eyes. But you forgot one thing. I saw it all. I heard it all. And now I know every weakness, every lie, every step you've taken thinking I couldn't respond." Olivia's lips parted, but no words came. Margaret stepped forward, trying to assert herself, but her confidence was as brittle as thin glass. "Victoria, we..." Victoria's glare cut her short, sharper than any blade. "You don't get to talk. You don't get to explain. You're already undone. I've watched and I've waited. You thought my silence was my death. It was my preparation. And you were the first to fall, even before you realize it." The room seemed to shrink around them, the luxury setting, the silk curtains, polished floors, leather chairs. Suddenly oppressive, almost suffocating. Everything they had counted on, their wealth, their influence, their arrogance, meant nothing against the force of a mother who refused to be erased. Ethan Caldwell's mind raced in frantic circles. His smug confidence had evaporated entirely, leaving only raw panic. He had assumed Victoria's death would secure him everything, a mistress in her place, inheritance unchallenged, family influence intact. But now, with her eyes sharp and unflinching, with her body fully alive again, all his assumptions were crumbling. He tried to speak, to regain some semblance of control, but the words failed him. His mouth opened and closed, a futile display of attempted authority. "Victoria, it's not, we thought." Victoria studied him, her fury tempered with cold calculation. Every betrayal he had committed, every lie he had told, every plan he had made was now visible to her, catalogued and ready to be used. She could see how he was weighing every option, panicking under pressure, trying to find a path that didn't exist. "You really believed I could be silenced," Victoria said slowly, almost savoring the weight of each word. "You thought I would vanish, that a declaration on paper, a false death, would erase me. But I'm not gone, Ethan. I am here, watching, waiting. And I am no longer powerless." Margaret's eyes flicked between Victoria and Ethan, a calculating glint returning, though tempered now by fear. Olivia cowered slightly, realizing that their combined efforts, all their schemes, meant nothing against the force before them. The room held its breath, as if the walls themselves were listening, absorbing the tension. Victoria, fully awake, fully aware, and fully alive, was no longer the patient in the hospital bed. She was the force they had underestimated, the storm they had ignored, and the reckoning they had all feared. And in that quiet, suffocating space, Victoria made her first internal promise. Nothing, not greed, not betrayal, not arrogance, would escape unpunished. They had thought her dead. They were wrong. Victoria Harper's mind worked like a clock, precise, merciless, and perfectly synchronized with every subtle movement in the room. After weeks trapped in silence, she now had full control over her body and the immediate environment. Every gesture she made, even the smallest twitch of her fingers, communicated the authority she had earned through suffering and observation. The room was quiet, the hospital's dim lighting casting long shadows across the polished floors. Margaret Caldwell shifted uncomfortably, her meticulously styled hair no longer enough to shield her from the storm in Victoria's gaze. Olivia Price, once audacious and triumphant, sat frozen, the silk of the stolen wedding dress clinging to her as though it were a second skin of guilt. Ethan Caldwell, pale and sweating, realized that every move he had made thinking Victoria would never return was now a liability, each misstep catalogued and analyzed. Victoria's first action was not a confrontation, it was a reveal. She had already been observing them, gathering evidence they did not know existed. Hidden emails, messages, transactions, and recorded confessions she had overheard while comatose were all stored in her mind. Now, she let them see the consequences without uttering a single word. Margaret's hand shook slightly as she tried to adjust her glasses. Victoria, this isn't necessary. Let's talk. Victoria tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. She didn't need to speak. The intensity of her stare conveyed the accumulation of rage, patience, and calculation. Every secret they had thought buried deep within the luxurious facade of their lives was now exposed in her presence. Olivia fumbled with her perfume bottle, realizing that even the smallest symbol of Victoria's stolen identity was meaningless under this scrutiny. Victoria finally broke the silence, her voice calm, deliberate, and weighted with authority. Do you remember the day you celebrated my death? Do you remember the way you paraded in what belonged to me? Every detail, every step, every word, it is all accounted for. Ethan's jaw clenched. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. There were no words to defend the indefensible. Margaret's sharp features twitched, a mixture of anger and fear crossing her face. Olivia's eyes darted between the two, realizing that the power balance had shifted entirely. Victoria's gaze swept the room, lingering on each of them long enough to make them squirm. She had once been helpless, but now she was the storm they could not outrun. Every whispered plot, every stolen asset, every cruel intention was now in her possession, not just as memory, but as leverage. And in that silence, she promised herself they would pay for every second of their arrogance, and she would enjoy every moment of it. Victoria's plans unfolded silently at first. She observed, she waited, she calculated, using every resource she had to regain control of what had been stolen from her. The stolen assets, the inheritance, and her children's rightful place were all part of a meticulous strategy. She began with subtle maneuvers. A phone call here, an email there, a carefully timed legal notice slipped into the right hands at the right moment. Each action was invisible, deliberate, and surgical. Olivia, still clinging to false bravado, had no idea that every luxurious possession she flaunted, the designer bags, the dresses, even the perfume, was being traced back and accounted for. Ethan Caldwell tried to assert some control, reaching out to high-powered contacts, calling in favors he had relied upon for years. But every move he made was anticipated, every action countered. Victoria's knowledge, her time spent in observation, gave her the upper hand. She knew exactly where each thread of their deceit ran, how to unravel it without leaving herself vulnerable. Margaret attempted a last-minute negotiation, the kind of high-stakes manipulation she had relied upon for decades. But Victoria, fully present and fully aware, dismantled her arguments before they even began. The matriarch's influence in business and society could not protect her from the precision with which Victoria operated. Victoria moved quietly, invisibly, ensuring that every betrayal was documented, every secret weaponized. And as each thread of their arrogance unraveled, she felt a surge of satisfaction. Not cruelty, but justice. Olivia, Margaret, and Ethan were powerful only because they had assumed she was powerless. That assumption had been their greatest mistake. The confrontation was now inevitable. Victoria Harper, fully aware of her enemy's weaknesses, now turned her attention to direct engagement. She did not rush. There was no need. Every move she had made up to this point had been preparation. She entered the lavish spaces they had considered their playgrounds. Ethan's office, Margaret's drawing room, Olivia's suite, each step measured, each gesture deliberate. Their opulent settings, meant to demonstrate control and influence, now became stages for their unraveling. Olivia's smug smile faltered when Victoria appeared unannounced at a high-profile gala, her presence announced not by words, but by the force of her eyes. The room seemed to contract around her, the chatter fading as if the walls themselves recognized her authority. "You underestimated me," Victoria whispered, more to herself than to the room, though everyone could hear it. The sound carried effortlessly, each syllable a verdict. "You counted me gone. You didn't consider that a mother doesn't disappear. She recalibrates and she returns stronger." Ethan Caldwell's attempts at excuses fell flat, Margaret's threats dissolved under scrutiny, and Olivia's confidence crumbled entirely. Victoria's revenge was not chaos, it was precision, surgical, and unyielding. She did not merely confront them, she dismantled the structures they had built on lies, greed, and arrogance. Every asset she reclaimed, every secret exposed, every lie revealed reinforced her dominance. She was no longer merely alive, she was a force that could not be resisted. Despite her strategic victories, Victoria Harper's greatest triumph was personal. She turned her focus toward her children, those innocent souls who had been pawns in the cruel games of her enemies. Each moment with them reinforced her purpose, strengthened the fire that had burned quietly in her mind while she had been trapped. The reunion was quiet but powerful. Her children, sensing her presence, responded with tentative smiles and cautious touches. Victoria's embrace was firm, protective, and possessive, not in dominance, but in reclamation of what had always been hers. Even in luxury, surrounded by silk, polished wood, and the faint scent of expensive perfumes, the intimate bond between mother and children transcended all material opulence. Victoria's presence alone reshaped their world, reclaiming the space that had been threatened by greed and deceit. Ethan and Margaret watched helplessly, realizing that no manipulation, no wealth, no document could undo what had been restored. Olivia, meanwhile, shrank from the maternal authority she could neither mimic nor resist. The children's innocent recognition of Victoria's strength magnified the impact of her return, underscoring the futility of the villain's efforts. Victoria Harper stood at the window of her restored home, sunlight reflecting off marble floors and crystal chandeliers, a setting that once symbolized luxury and betrayal, now a fortress of triumph. She watched the city below, each light a reminder of the battles fought and won, of patience and precision, of justice served. Her enemies were not destroyed recklessly, they were dismantled deliberately, each action a measured response to past betrayals. Olivia's schemes, Ethan's arrogance, Margaret's. Behind them, the doors to the past remained closed. Ahead of them, everything remained theirs. And the crown she carried remained exactly where it belonged. If you enjoyed this story, don't just watch and leave. Like this video, share it with friends and family. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel for more powerful and interesting stories. Bye, see you in the next one.